Every year, there's always a handful of quarterbacks who lose their starting job. And unfortunately for those players, many of them never ever get a starting job ever again. So today, I want to talk about 5 former starting quarterbacks who I don't believe will be getting a starting job anytime soon. So in this list, we're going to be talking about the 5 players, as I mentioned, who were former starting quarterbacks last year and for the past couple years, who are no longer starting quarterbacks. There's always a chance that these guys will get some starts because they are technically backup quarterbacks, so they can always get some starts here and there. I just don't think it's going to be a long-term starting position. Let's get into the list. Starting up at number 5, we're going to be talking about Zach Wilson. Now, Zach Wilson was thrusted into a pretty poor situation when he was drafted by the New York Jets. While playing for the New York Jets between 2021 and 2023, he put up a total of 6,293 yards, a completion percentage of 57%, and only 23 touchdowns, with more interceptions than touchdowns. Every single year, he got sacked a crap ton, he threw a lot of interceptions, and he really did not live up to the expectations that we all had for the guy. And truth be told, I do feel bad for Zach Wilson because I felt like he was a player that never should have been taken in the first top 5 picks in an NFL draft. I thought he had a lot of really good talent, a very strong arm, decent pocket mobility. I thought his mechanics were pretty sharp. Overall, I just thought the only thing that really struggled with him was his mental process. And I don't know why, when he was coming out of the draft, I just had this gut feeling that he was never going to get that process down, especially with a team like the New York Jets, who don't have an offensive-minded head coach. And as I mentioned, the New York Jets situation in and of itself wasn't really meant for him to succeed. That was not a team that had a good offensive line. That was not a team that had good wide receivers or a dynamic run game. Really, this is the best current New York Jets roster that we've seen in a couple years, and unfortunately, by the time that we get this good roster, Zach Wilson has basically completely depleted all of his talents, and he is no longer a caliber quarterback who should be starting in the NFL. I do believe that if Zach Wilson had been drafted in this year's draft and sat behind Aaron Rodgers for a year or two, I think that would have been a much better path for his career to go down. But unfortunately for Zach Wilson, he was thrust into a starting position with a roster that was not built for him to succeed, and unfortunately he was failure from day one, basically. He is currently one of the backup quarterbacks for the Denver Broncos, and yes, I say one of because I don't even think he's technically the number 2 on that roster. Do I think he'll ever get a starting position in the NFL again? Honestly, I kind of hope he does, just because I want to see what he can actually do with the good roster, but do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. However, I still think this guy has a bunch of talent, so it will be interesting to see what he can do maybe as the backup or future starter for the Denver Broncos. We'll just have to wait and see. Next up at number 4, we're going to be talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo's had a pretty bizarre career arc. Basically, it starts off in 2014 when he was drafted by the New England Patriots in the 2nd round. He was thought of to be the future starting quarterback for the New England Patriots after the departure of Tom Brady. As we all know, Tom Brady would not leave the New England Patriots in time for Jimmy Garoppolo to get that starting position. I don't think Tom Brady left till like 2019, which was 3 years after Jimmy Garoppolo actually left the Patriots. Jimmy Garoppolo was eventually traded to the San Francisco 49ers with the same ambitions of being the starting quarterback for the 49ers. And he had a big up and down career with the San Francisco 49ers. His best year of his career was arguably in 2019 when he had a total of 3,978 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. But he just really suffered from injuries and just not playing consistently good football, and it felt like that Niners team was way too good to be struggling with a quarterback like a Jimmy Garoppolo. Unfortunately, in 2022, he had one of his better years of his career, having 2,437 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, but unfortunately, it would lead to an injury, which, fortunately for the Niners, would give them Brock Purdy, who would end up being the best quarterback that they've had in quite some time. Last year, he would go to the Las Vegas Raiders, and he would play basically the worst football of his career. In his one season with the Las Vegas Raiders, he had a completion percentage of 65%, a total yardage of 1,205 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions before he got benched for Aiden O'Connell. And as it sits today, he is now a member of the Los Angeles Rams as the backup quarterback for Matthew Stafford, which, to be honest with you, is probably a pretty nice gig for him. Now, as to why Jimmy Garoppolo failed as a quarterback, I don't really feel like it was the teams that he was on or the situation necessarily around him. I just think this was more of a matter of the pure talent of quarterback that Jimmy Garoppolo was. Jimmy Garoppolo was one of the safer quarterbacks in the NFL. He had a really good ball down the middle of the field, but when it comes down to those harder outside of the hash marks type of throws, this is not a guy who you're really going to be asking to do a whole lot of that. So when you put him in a situation like the Las Vegas Raiders, where the talent was not nearly as much as the San Francisco 49ers, it was pretty obvious because he sucked at it. In my opinion, he was a really good quarterback because of the situation that was around him with the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan. And once he got out of that situation and went to an offense that wasn't as dynamic as those Niners offense, you could definitely see the limitations of Jimmy Garoppolo. As I mentioned, he is now the backup quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, and I actually do think that is a pretty good situation for him to be in. If Matthew Stafford goes down, which typically he does probably go down for a game or two, we'll likely see Jimmy Jimmy Garoppolo step in and play some pretty decent football. Next up at number 3, we're going to be talking about Mac Jones, the now current backup of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the former starting quarterback of the New England Patriots. This is a pretty weird story to kind of complete because at the beginning of Mac Jones' career, he was thought of to be the future stud quarterback for this Patriots team, to be the replacement for Tom Brady. In 2021, he had his best year of his career, which was his rookie year, where he had a completion percentage of 67%, 3,801 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. He would make the Pro Bowl, and everybody thought that this guy was going to be just as good as Tom Brady, and that this team was going to have their franchise quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. Unfortunately for Mac Jones and this New England Patriots team, the roster got much worse around him, and I think the coaching as a whole really did not suit the strengths of Mac Jones. And his 2022 and 2023 seasons were a little bit more lackluster than what his rookie year was. 2023 was by far the worst year of his career, where he had a total of 10 touchdowns and 12 interceptions and only 2,120 yards. And he would get benched a couple times throughout the season for a guy in Bailey Zappi who wasn't that good either. And it seemed pretty obvious in 2023 that Mac Jones really wasn't the talented enough quarterback that this Patriots team needed, because this Patriots team as a whole roster-wise was getting worse and worse by the year. And because Mac Jones wasn't a talent like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, he was not able to elevate the current roster around him. Again, when he was drafted in that 2021 draft, Mac Jones was thought of to be somebody who had a lot of talent, but wasn't necessarily somebody who you expected to go out there and be a top 10 quarterback. The hope for him was that he could develop to being a top 15 quarterback, and at some point maybe reaching into that top 10, just because of how good the roster was around him and how good he was at just reading the game, sort of like how Tom Brady was. But unfortunately, that's not how it goes, and he is now the current backup to Trevor Lawrence, which honestly is maybe the worst situation of any of the quarterbacks I'm going to talk about in this video. And the reason why I say that is because, well, Trevor Lawrence is about to get a pretty fat contract extension. It's not going to give Mac Jones any time to be the starting quarterback for this team, barring an injury, which Trevor Lawrence hasn't typically had any injuries. Next up at number 2, we're going to be talking about Kenny Pickett. Now, Kenny Pickett was drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers in a late first-round pick a couple years back. And basically, right from the start, we all kind of knew that this guy was not going to be the franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In his rookie year, he only had 2,404 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Yes, he did not play the full season, but still, to only have 7 touchdowns and 9 interceptions was very disappointing. But the expectation for him was that in his next year, which is going to be last year, he was going to take that big step forward and be this fantastic quarterback. But unfortunately, he really did not take that big of a step forward. He ended the season with 62% completion percentage, 2,070 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And yes, he did not play the full season, but still, even when he was playing in most games, he was playing pretty trash. Eventually, he would get healthy later in the season, but they would ultimately keep the starting job with Mason Rudolph, which would basically indicate that they were not going to have Kenny Pickett be the franchise quarterback moving forward. I still feel like Kenny Pickett is a pretty solid backup quarterback in the NFL, but I just don't think he's ever going to be that starting caliber guy. He is now the backup quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, which honestly is not the worst situation in the world, because I actually do think that Kenny Pickett could fit a system like Jalen Hurts pretty nicely. I think the reason why Kenny Pickett struggled with the Pittsburgh Steelers was a bit of a plethora of a couple issues. Number one, I felt like the team culture offensively just was not really a good fit with a guy like Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett isn't much of like that leader guy like you're going to see from a guy like Russell Wilson and hopefully Justin Fields, and I felt like that offense really needed that big vocal leader who's going to go out there and tell people what to do, kind of like a Jalen Hurts or a Dak Prescott or a Patrick Mahomes type of guy. Unfortunately, Kenny Pickett wasn't really that. It also doesn't help when your offensive coordinators were Matt Canada, and it just was a terrible fit from day one. Matt Canada was probably the worst offensive coordinator in the league for the 2 years that he was the coordinator for Kenny Pickett, and unfortunately, by the time that they got rid of Kenny Pickett, he would be off the team, and now you're going to see guys like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, which I think are better fits for what they're going to do with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. But all in all, I still believe in Kenny Pickett as a backup quarterback, and I do think that he will get a couple starts as a rotational quarterback when Jalen Hurts goes down, or so be it, whatever may happen. But at number 1, we're going to be talking about Desmond Ridder, the current backup quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals and the former starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, last year, 2023, really felt like it was going to be basically a tryout year for Desmond Ridder, somebody who didn't really have the talent, was a late draft pick, and wasn't really thought to be the franchise quarterback, but if it worked out and he was awesome in 2023, then he was going to be the future starting quarterback of this team, and unfortunately, it didn't really work out that way. In the 2 years that he did play, he had a completion percentage of 64%, a total yardage of 3,544 yards, 14 touchdowns, touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And last year, he was pretty mediocre when he was playing. My biggest issue with Desmond Ridder is that he was far too safe with his career. Oftentimes, you see these quarterbacks who go out there and they just seem like they're a little bit scared of the moment and don't really want to go out there and be too aggressive and make too many mistakes because they ultimately want to keep their position in the league. But I feel like if you want to be a franchise quarterback for a franchise like the Atlanta Falcons, you got to go out there and actually prove that you can be that guy by going out there and being somewhat aggressive. And unfortunately for Desmond Ridder, that was just never what he was really capable of doing. I never really thought of him as a super aggressive quarterback when he went to Cincinnati, but it really felt like it was at an all-time low when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. It felt like he was pretty scared to throw the ball too far down the field, and it also doesn't help when your offensive coordinator was Arthur Smith, who likes to run the football more than pass the football, but it even felt like there was a lack of trust between those two guys as well. As to what caused him to lose his job, again, I don't really feel like it was the talent around him or necessarily the system around him, because Arthur Smith's system, in my opinion, is kind of built for a quarterback similar to Desmond Ridder. For me, it was more of the fact that Desmond Ridder just didn't really take advantage of the opportunity that was given to him. Again, he was far too safe when he was out there. He didn't really try to aggressively push the ball down the field. He didn't aggressively use his legs to make plays. It just felt like he would always take the checkdowns when necessary. And I'm not saying that's a bad way to play football. I'm just saying that when you're given an opportunity to be the starting quarterback for a team, in my opinion, you should take full advantage of it by being super aggressive and trying different things out. But I actually do think the Arizona Cardinals as a backup situation is actually quite nice over there. You get a backup Kyler Murray who's had a bunch of injury problems throughout his career, so if a guy like Kyler does go down, you step right up and you're the starting quarterback for the team yet again, and maybe you can get some more money, maybe someday as a franchise quarterback, or maybe to be a franchise backup quarterback. We'll just have to wait and see. But you guys, if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and if I missed any quarterbacks, which I don't think I did, but if I did, let me know in the comment section below, and maybe we'll do a part 2 if there's enough names out there. But I love you guys. Peace.